In a zombie-infested post-apocalyptic world, is the sea safer than the land? Last season, the zombie virus broke out in Los Angeles. In the pursuit of eradicating zombies, the military resorted to using artillery to destroy the entire city. Under Victor's shelter, Travis' family boarded Victor's private yacht. Victor informed them that the ship was equipped with abundant supplies, enough to sustain them on their journey to another major city. One day, cries for help reached them from the sea. With uncertainty about what to do, Madison finds Victor and asks Victor to stop the boat and save the men or they will drown. However, Victor showed reluctance, suggesting they could go back to the shore if they were afraid of drowning. He believed that offering them shelter already demonstrated enough kindness, and they should be grateful. Travis has seen the people who are calling for help. His daughter was telling Travis that we had to help them, and then Travis came into the cab. Victor said we should get away from land and away from other people. Madison is still asking Victor to stop the boat, but Victor is a businessman and obviously knows more about the rules of survival in the post-apocalyptic world. Victor's attitude is also very tough. Stopping the boat can be done, but only people can get off the boat, not get on. It's rare for Travis to agree with Victor. Frustrated, Madison had no choice but to leave. Victor puts it in third gear and moves forward. He just wants to get rid of these people who are begging for help as soon as possible. In the evening, Alicia listened to various distress calls on the radio. She stumbled upon a channel playing music and a charismatic man's voice who engaged her with seductive words. Alicia found herself drawn to him. Every day after that, Alicia used the radio to chat with this man named Jack. Jack says he's on a boat with his brother. They quickly became acquainted, and Alicia felt like she was falling in love, dropping her guard completely. One day, Jack told Alicia that their small boat was damaged and they had to return to the land. Alicia was worried about Jack encountering zombies on land and anxiously asked about their location, even revealing her own location to Jack. Alicia, with an anxious face, finds Travis and says that someone needs help, and tells him about Jack and the others. Victor's temper flared immediately. He had a bad feeling about this. He scolded the group, reminding them that the boat was his, and the people outside were more dangerous than the zombies. Others thought Victor was being overly sensitive. Alicia could only communicate with Jack through the radio, explaining that she was helpless to assist him. Jack reassured her, saying it would be alright, and they would meet soon. Soon after, they encountered a sinking ship. Everyone was stunned, as this clearly wasn't a natural disaster but a human-made catastrophe. At that moment, their cruise ship detected another yacht rapidly approaching them. Victor had no choice but to alert everyone to quickly leave, fearing that it could be the same group responsible for the sinking ship incident.
They're coming! Run!
Victor led the group to shake off the pursuit. However, the boat encountered a problem when Travis inspected it and found that the air intake was blocked by zombies. Repairing the boat would take a day's time. From a distance, they saw numerous scattered suitcases on a nearby island. Daniel decided to go to the island with 3 young people to collect supplies, which seemed to be the wreckage of a crashed plane. Yet there was no one here, which puzzled them. They split up to search for supplies, with Daniel primarily looking for antibiotics for his daughter, Ophelia. Nick found a stylish captain's outfit and tried it on. Travis' son, Chris, wandered away from the group and stumbled upon the wreckage of the plane's cabin. Chris picks up a weapon and walks in. Inside, he encountered zombified passengers, but they were securely restrained by their seatbelts and posed no immediate threat. However, Chris came across a severely injured man who begged for help. When Chris finally helped him down, he realized the man's injuries were beyond survivable in this apocalyptic world. With great distress, Chris had to put the man out of his misery. Meanwhile, Daniel and the others gathered supplies but couldn't find Chris. Daniel was about to look for Chris when he realized that a large number of zombies were surrounding him. It turns out that all the passengers have been turned into zombies. Daniel fired 2 shots and retreated with a stranger, a woman he encountered. Upon hearing the gunshots, Chris and Alicia rushed to the scene to help. Several people fought and retreated at the same time. Although the speed of the zombies was very slow, the number was just too much, and several people were forced into a desperate situation. However, just as they were about to be cornered, a blood-covered man appeared and saved them. Surprisingly, the zombies didn't attack him, and the savior was Nick. It turns out that just now, Nick was searching for supplies and saw a zombie inside the pit with crabs crawling all over it, but he didn't realize that his foot slipped and Nick fell down. Luckily, Nick had a dagger with him and killed the zombie before Nick could catch his breath. another zombie fell from the top.
Oh shit!
Nick survives, but is covered in zombie blood, but he discovers that the zombies see him as one of their own kind. They return to the ship with the strange woman and her injured husband. Alicia and Madison wanted to help the woman, but Victor intervened, resolute in his belief that being a soft-hearted person was not viable in the apocalypse. Despite Travis and his family advocating for the woman, Victor was firm in his stance. Ultimately, Travis suggested they could tow the strangers along, and Victor, in consideration of Travis' effort in repairing the yacht, reluctantly agreed. They provided some essential supplies to the woman, but she showed no gratitude and instead displayed a hint of resentment. As evening approached, Victor pondered but stood firm in his principles. He decisively went to the stern of the boat and cut the yacht's rope. That night, Ophelia and Chris were talking on the deck. A small boat approached them, seeking help. On the boat were two men and a pregnant woman. Chris picked up his gun, vigilant, and called for his father, Travis. Hearing the shouts, the rest of the group came to the deck, armed with weapons. The woman seemed to have a severe leg injury, and Madison hurriedly approached to assist her and take her to a room for rest. Meanwhile, Travis and the others were questioning the two men. Victor was also drawn to the commotion and peered out from the second floor. Sensing something amiss, Victor returns to the cabin and opens his safe, only to find that the gun's magazine has disappeared. Earlier, others had discovered his gun and, to be cautious, removed the ammunition. Victor can't help but curse a few times. At this time Alicia also walked out. She only felt that the voice outside was very familiar. Wasn't it Jack's voice?
Jack?
Suddenly the man attacked Travis. Madison was quickly subdued by the woman, who then tied her up. Outside, the others were also overpowered, and Alicia's still trying to move Jack with her words. The man seemed to know everyone's name and their details, most likely because of the information Alicia had shared. At that moment the man spots Victor on the surface and Victor escapes. The man tells Jack to shoot Victor, but Jack is obviously not tough enough and he has to do it himself.
Did you get him?
If I didn't, the hypothermia will.
Victor has always had his secrets, and will he finally survive at sea? Although Jack and Reed took control of the yacht, Victor had taken the boat's keys with him. Reed threatened to kill Chris unless Travis handed over the keys. To protect his son, Travis claimed he could start the yacht without the keys. Reed ordered the pregnant woman to stay behind and keep an eye on them while he took Travis to start the yacht. With Jack holding Alicia hostage, Madison, emotional about her daughter being taken away, was comforted by Alicia.
I'm okay. I trust him. I brought this on us. I can make it better.
Jack then took Alicia out on the deck and untied her. Jack told Alicia that he didn't want to hurt anyone. Jack revealed that they were just a scouting party, and their leader was Connor. He assured Alicia that Connor was a good person, and things would be peaceful when he arrived. Now Jack needs to inform Connor via the radio, and he asks Alicia to accompany him to find it. Alicia chose to trust Jack and helped him find the radio. Jack notified Connor to send someone to take over. In the cabin, Madison noticed Nick's absence and asked Daniel if he could loosen the ropes. Daniel asked Maddie to distract the woman. Madison engaged in a conversation with the woman about pregnancy. As for the missing Nick, it turns out that Victor had let him escape when the group boarded the boat. Nick swam to shore and saw a helicopter flying overhead. There were numerous tents, but no people around. Boldly, Nick walked up to a zombie and lured it into one of the tents. After killing the zombie, he dissected it and covered himself in its blood. Nick covered his body with zombie blood and mimicked the movements of the zombies, allowing him to blend perfectly into the horde. Following the address provided by Victor, Nick came to this location to find a person named Luis. Luis recognized Nick when he saw Victor's letter and no longer doubted his intentions. Originally, Luis was supposed to take Victor to seek refuge in Mexico. However, their plans were disrupted when the yacht was hijacked by others. Meanwhile, Jack's leader, Connor, finally boarded the yacht and seemed pleased with it. Connor ordered Reed to send Madison and the others ashore and then return with the yacht. However, Connor took Travis and Alicia with him. After Connor's departure, Reed had no intention of following Connor's orders and planned to kill them. Just then the men said there was an unknown yacht in the sea, and the men immediately went on the alert. It was Nick and Luis. Luis took out a 98K rifle and shot the woman holding a sniper rifle first. then killed another man. Reed tried to investigate outside but was overpowered by Daniel, who took away Reed's shotgun. Madison also swiftly stabbed Reed's waist with a knife. Chris rushed forward, intending to kill Reed, but Madison stopped him. Unable to bring herself to kill a living person, Madison also saw Nick in the distance. In the distant sea, Victor let go of the leaking yacht and lay still in the water. Victor will freeze to death if he doesn't drown. Madison came to Victor's side, and it became apparent that the people on the yacht did not like Victor, considering him too cold-blooded. Reed, despite his injury, continued to spew threats towards Daniel, but Daniel remained unmoved, having experienced far more cruelty in his life. Daniel found useful information in Reed's words. Reed was Connor's brother, and while Connor didn't kill people during their robberies, Reed was merciless. Reed also mentioned that Connor had 5 boats, which led Daniel and Madison to quickly locate the place on the radar. Using Reed as a bargaining chip, they could potentially exchange Travis and Alicia. Uncharacteristically, Victor agreed to join the risky plan. As they approached the dock, Connor anticipated his brother's return, but instead, he received Madison's radio call. Madison proposed to exchange hostages in an hour. Connor agreed, stating that if his brother was unharmed, the exchange could happen. Just when they thought the exchange was going to go smoothly, gunshots rang out. Chris backed away slowly with the gun in his hand. He had always blamed himself. If he had shot decisively to keep these people off the boat, his father would not have been taken away. Upon entering the house, they found Reed dead. Louise commented that there were no chips left. However, Daniel came up with a plan. Person in the show was a carrier of the virus, and regardless of the cause of death, they would turn into zombies. They put a hood on zombie Reed, tied him up, and brought him to the dock for the exchange. Connor brings Travis in, while Alicia is not imprisoned because of Jack. Madison unties Reed's hands and pushes him forward in a hostage exchange, but just as Connor removes his hood, he sees a horrible face. The zombie viciously bites into Connor's body. On the other hand, Alicia ran to the highest point of the ship and saw her mother and Travis struggling with Connor's men. Jack followed Alicia, trying to convince her to stay, claiming her family was selfish and would eventually abandon her.
I'm sorry.
Alicia!
Finally, Alicia made the right decision. Victor and Luis took everyone to Mexico. When they came to the border, Victor told the group to hide in the cabin of the ship while he and Luis negotiated with them. After a few minutes of negotiation, the soldiers took a liking to the ship. Then shots rang out, and it sounded like a gunfight had broken out. The group rushed out, and Victor had driven the yacht through the border. However, 2 dead soldiers were found on the deck, along with Luis lying in a pool of blood. Victor led them towards their destination on land. Finally, they arrived at a peaceful estate, untouched by the apocalypse. Inside the well-protected walls of the estate, they found an abundant supply of fruits, vegetables, and even wind power, enabling them to be self-sufficient in the post-apocalyptic world. Travis and the others finally found a safe haven, and their tense emotions began to ease. Guided by the estate's servants, they let down their guard and brought out their weapons. Victor, on the other hand, was extremely anxious and was taken to a room by the woman in charge, and Victor finally meets the love of his life, Thomas. Thomas has a wound on his hand. He was bitten by a zombie some time ago. Victor's heart aches to know that Thomas doesn't have much time left. At this point, Chris is also a little embarrassed because before entering the manor, they encountered a zombie. Madison was jumped by a zombie, and Chris froze in his tracks. Alicia thought that Chris was deliberately trying not to save Madison. Alicia doesn't believe Chris' explanation. Chris loses his patience and threatens Alicia not to talk to anyone about the incident, and Alicia is clearly bluffed. Madison and Travis are in the middle of an argument over the incident. Travis thinks Chris is just a kid. Travis could tolerate Nick, but Madison couldn't forgive Chris. In the end, the couple decided to sleep in separate beds tonight. However, the whole manor has a weirdness to it that can't be explained. The owner of the estate turned out to be Victor's lover, Thomas. However, due to being infected by the zombie virus, the estate was actually under the control of Celia. Celia, the mother of Luis, who died on the yacht, showed no emotion upon hearing the news of her son's death. Daniel sensed that something was off. Later that night, Daniel investigated the estate on his own and witnessed a disturbing scene. A young boy threw a dog into a pipeline, and the dog's agonizing cries echoed. Upon following the boy, Daniel discovered him muttering to himself in a room. What shocked him was finding numerous zombies hidden throughout the seemingly peaceful estate. Then Daniel went to Celia's room to ask questions, only to realize that Celia is a complete psychopath. Celia believes that zombies are another form of human, and that as long as they don't get shot in the head, they'll stay alive. So, whenever someone in the estate fell seriously ill or got bitten by zombies, Celia used poison to make them die, thinking they could then stay with their loved ones forever. The pills on the plate now are for Thomas. That's a pretty sick idea. Celia later hummed a song while cleaning Thomas's face in his room and then asked Victor to administer the poison to him so that Thomas could continue his life in a different form. Victor looked at Thomas with deep affection on his face. He had made the decision to accompany Thomas to his death, but was rejected by Thomas. Meanwhile, Chris woke up in his bed and quietly called out to Alicia, intending to have a heartfelt talk and apologize to her. However, he noticed a dagger on the cabinet, as all weapons should have been confiscated. Suddenly, gunshots rang out. Madison and Alicia were awakened to see Chris standing next to the bed with a dagger. This situation seemed impossible to explain. Chris had no choice but to run away. The gunshots are Victor saying goodbye to Thomas because he doesn't trust Celia's methods. Victor believed this was the true way to let Thomas find peace, not as a walking corpse. This incident quickly stirred up commotion at the estate, and Celia angrily slapped Victor. If you were Victor, what would you do? Could zombies be another extension of life? Nick has known Celia since he arrived on the property, and they both agree that zombies are another form of human and shouldn't be treated as monsters. They felt like kindred spirits in this belief. However, Victor disagreed with this approach, as he believed that allowing the bitten loved ones to roam as zombies wasn't setting them free. He shoots his lover outright. Enraging Celia, she gave Victor a day to bury the dead and then ordered him to leave the estate. Madison and the others were not allowed to stay either. Madison has to come to terms with this, even though everyone is very reluctant to go back to their uprooted lives. Nick sees it coming, so he brings Celia's zombified son Luis back from the cruise ship. In Celia's eyes, as long as Luis wasn't shot in the head, he was still her child. Celia now appreciates Nick even more. Nick promised that his family would not harm anyone, and Celia reluctantly agreed to let them stay. But Victor was not allowed to remain and had to leave. Madison, however, was worried about Travis's safety. Chris had previously left the estate, and Travis went looking for him but hadn't returned yet. Nick decided to go out again to find Travis and Chris and bring them back. Nick finally found Travis and Chris after great difficulty, but Chris was still in a rebellious state, and Travis chose to stay with him to help him overcome his psychological barriers, temporarily refusing to return to the estate. Nick realized that persuading them further would be futile and bid farewell to Travis. Meanwhile, something else was happening at the estate. Daniel had become increasingly paranoid since discovering the estate's eccentricities. Whenever he had the chance, he wanted to leave this place of evil, dragging his daughter along with him. Eventually, Daniel clashed with one of the estate guards, using his homemade blade to injure the person. As a result, Celia locked Daniel in the basement. Celia was skilled at manipulating minds and continuously urged Daniel to repent. Later that night, while the guard was feeding Daniel knocked him unconscious with a headbutt, took the guard's keys and lighter, and had visions of his deceased wife, who advised him to protect their daughter. Madison also began to notice that something was off with Celia. She felt that her son, Nick, had changed significantly since meeting her. Celia was pleased to have Madison join her family and took her to where the zombies were being kept. Madison was shocked by the scene before her the zombies were having their dinner. Celia asked, "Wouldn't you feed your children if they were hungry?" This confirmed Madison's suspicion that Celia was indeed a monster. Madison slowly backed out of the room and locked the door behind her. Celia remained expressionless. Later, Daniel arrived at the room and poured gasoline inside. He started to have hallucinations, seeing the zombies as they were in life, begging him for release. He even saw his wife smiling at him. Daniel dropped his lighter, and the fire instantly covered the petrol. Madison arrives at this point to look for Daniel, but the place has gone up in flames. She had to tell Ophelia that her father couldn't make it out. Victor, who had left but returned to rescue them, saw the flames and came to their aid. Madison wanted to wait a little longer for Nick and Travis to return. Just as they were preparing to leave, Madison saw a figure in the distance covered in zombie blood. It was Nick. He said that Travis didn't want to come back for the time being. Nick asked his mom what happened here. "Where's Celia?" Seeing his mother's silence, Nick knew that the destruction of this place must be due to his mother and the others. Nick was completely disappointed, turned and ran towards the zombie horde. In Nick's eyes, his family was scarier than the zombies. Nick decided to search for a place that didn't view zombies as monsters. The next day, the surviving maid provided Nick with some supplies and told him to head north, where there were human bases. Alone, Nick embarked on the journey to the north, his body covered in zombie blood to avoid any trouble from the zombies. By nightfall, Nick was exhausted and found shelter in an abandoned house. In the middle of the night, a figure approached slowly. A woman, seemingly insane, attacked Nick with a baseball bat, claiming the area as her territory. Nick tried to explain that he just wanted his backpack and would leave, but the woman's madness escalated, and Nick had no choice but to escape. With no supplies, Nick continued his journey northward. Looking at the zombies in the cars, he felt no fear, as zombies were much simpler to deal with than humans. Every drop of water became essential for Nick's survival. While fiddling with a radio, he spotted an approaching off-road vehicle in the distance. Nick quickly hid. 3 men got out of the vehicle, seemingly enjoying killing zombies for fun. They scrutinized the car and found an old man who had survived dehydration. The old man asked for help. They shocked Nick by their ruthless behavior. If they found him, he knew he would be dead. Just then, the radio started making noise. Taking a risk, Nick rushed out, and the 3 men started shooting at him. Nick realized that his only chance of survival was to run into the nearby woods, using his agility to dodge countless bullets. Exhausted, Nick didn't know how long he ran, but the intense activity drained him of much energy. The scorching sun even left the cacti dehydrated. Desperate for water, Nick crushed a cactus and tried to drink its fluid, but it only made him vomit, and he even resorted to drinking his urine. Nick woke up the next day to the dog barking. He had to climb onto the roof of a car to escape them, but not without getting bitten on his leg. Helpless, Nick lay on the car roof. At this time, a group of zombies in the distance attracted. The dog, directly crazy, pounced on the zombies. The end can be imagined. It didn't take long for the dog to be eaten clean by the zombies. The zombies then closed in on Nick. Nick closed his eyes and prayed. Suddenly, in the distance, he heard a car horn and gunshots. It should be the 3 people who were previously chasing Nick. Seeing the zombies walking away, Nick forced himself to eat a piece of the dog's corpse. Nick tied up his injured leg with a belt. His body was coated with zombie blood. Nick just walked among the zombies. In this moment, Nick felt an unprecedented sense of safety. He almost felt like the zombies were telling him, "Follow us, and we'll take you home." The zombies soon reached the highway, heading towards the location of the earlier gunshots. Sure enough, it was the same 3 men, turning their killings into a sick game. Every day, their enjoyment was a competition to slaughter zombies. Nick knew that if he exposed himself, they would torture him to death. As the zombies around him gradually fell, Nick remained composed and walked with them. The men's bullets were now panicking on the ground. Another chubby man was tackled by a zombie. Their companion drove away, leaving them behind. Nick continued to walk with the zombies, unaware that someone had already noticed his uniqueness. Eventually, Nick succumbed to dehydration and collapsed. These 3 don't look like bad guys, but they don't choose to save Nick either. After all, life is hard in the post-apocalyptic world. Nick felt death approaching, but miraculously, a heavy rain woke Nick up again, and he desperately drank the rainwater. He then arrived at a small town, starving after 2 days without food. The priority now was to disinfect his leg wound, but the pharmacy was emptied long ago. Nick had to use duct tape to roughly bandage the wound. Just then, someone came through the door with a gun. The same guys who watched Nick from afar yesterday. Nick hurriedly explained that the wound was from a dog, not a zombie. Luciana confirmed it and gave Nick some water. They brought Nick to a clinic to treat his wound, where Dr. Alejandro disinfected it. Alejandro asks Nick why he's traveling with zombies. Nick explained that he was searching for a place that didn't see zombies as monsters. Without saying a word, Alejandro opened the door, and Nick stepped outside, feeling an unreal sensation. The town was prosperous and bustling, with people shopping, exercising, and children enjoying happy lives. This was the place Nick had been seeking. The next day, Nick woke up from the most comfortable sleep he had experienced in the apocalypse. However, when he went outside, he found the lively streets empty, except for a teary-eyed little girl calling for her father. Looking in the direction she pointed, Nick saw everyone gathered there. A man came to Alejandro and handed over his dagger. After saying a final goodbye, The man stepped into the bus and followed the carriage all the way to the rear of the bus. This abandoned bus was the only passage leading out of the base. The man walked into the midst of the zombies. Not knowing what was happening, Nick didn't want the little girl to witness the bloody scene. The villagers chanted something like a sacrificial spell, and the man's screams echoed in the sky. Afterward, life returned to normal. Luciana found Nick and brought him back to the bus. Luciana looks cold in the face of Nick's questioning. Luciana arrives in the middle of the zombie horde. After a series of actions, she scolds Nick to keep quiet at all times, and then smears zombie blood all over her body. They were planning to go outside again. Their purpose was to exchange supplies with other surviving bases. Along the way, Nick finally learned the truth. The actual leader of this base was Alejandro, a devout believer. Luciana had witnessed Alejandro being bitten by a zombie but not turning into one, which elevated his status among the people. Anyone bitten by a zombie would be sacrificed to the deceased, thus protecting their loved one's safety. They arrived at the trading place, a large supermarket occupied by a group of survivors. They were well armed, and almost all surrounding bases came here to exchange supplies. Luciana offered her medicine, which was supposed to get 2 carts of water but was now limited to 1 cart. The interior of the supermarket was very spacious, and there were many people guarding it. Their families lived inside the supermarket as well. Nick took one look at a sickly woman, a clear sign of addiction, medicines they can only exchange. As they were preparing to leave after getting supplies, a man rushed forward and tackled Nick, quickly finding a pack of snacks on him. Luciana was also furious at this. Nick is in danger of having his hands chopped off.
Translate for me. Ask him if that's his sister in there. Is it your sister in there? Ask him. Can he say?
Due to the difference in race, Luciana reluctantly acted as a translator. Nick then said, "Your sister's had a drug attack, hasn't she? They're the only ones with the drugs. If you don't let me go, they won't come here to exchange supplies anymore. Without the drugs, your sister will turn into a zombie within a week. Now, not only do you have to let me go, but you also have to give us another cart of fresh water." Nick knew he had taken the right gamble. On their way back home, Nick was pleased with the extra cart of water he obtained. However, Luciana isn't happy because Nick's reckless behavior could cost them their lives, and hiding the location of their base from those people is crucial. Back at the base, Nick gave the pack of snacks to the little girl who had just lost her father. Luciana witnessed this scene and realized that Nick had brought the snacks for the girl, which changed her perception of him. Later, Alejandro called Nick for a conversation and reprimanded him for his actions at the supermarket. Alejandro tells him it's not the snacks that really give people hope. It's keeping them alive longer term. The medicine they used for exchanges was running out, and they needed a new solution. Nick finally realized how close he came to causing a disaster. Alejandro is a competent leader who has built a base of survival in this apocalypse and has also given people the conviction to live. The next day, Nick approached Alejandro with a can of powdered milk and presented a bold idea. As a former drug addict, Nick knew how to replace drugs when they were scarce. Using the equipment at the settlement, Nick crushed the remaining medicine, mixed it with powdered milk, and compressed it into more medicine. That buys the base a long time to survive. Since then, Nick has become more comfortable on the base and has developed a rapport with everyone. He went out every week to exchange supplies. In appreciation of Nick's contributions, Alejandro prepared a room specifically for him, which made Nick thrilled. Even though they spoke different languages, being given his own place represented true acceptance from the community. That night, Luciana visited Nick's room for a heart-to-heart talk, and their relationship deepened. What happened to Travis and his son who left? Travis sat in the back of the car, his face full of melancholy, gazing ahead. To accompany Chris through his rebellious phase, Travis had to separate from Madison and the others. Chris met 3 young people on the way, and he felt understood and accepted by them. They arrived at an abandoned farm in the outskirts. The place was deserted but well equipped. Travis wants to stay there, but Chris has other plans and wants to explore the world with his newfound friends. He despises weak fathers. Chris relished the feeling of being accepted by his peers. Inside the barn, they found many chickens, providing them with a meal for the night. But outside, Travis discovers graves under the trees. Realizing that the farm owners may still be there, Travis tries to persuade them to stop trespassing on other people's property. They ignore Travis, and Travis is left to control his son. A rebellious Chris doesn't respond to Travis at all, and he continues to do what he's doing. A man with a shotgun, the farm's owner, confronted them and asked them to leave. Travis continued to urge the young people to leave, but one of them broke a chicken's neck. Farm's owner shot one of the young men in the knee. Unexpectedly, Chris shot and killed the farm's owner, seemingly enjoying the act. Travis was on his knees, just looking at this strange son, filled with remorse and guilt. Meanwhile, Victor, Madison, and the others returned from the estate, intending to go back to the yacht. To their dismay, they found the yacht had been taken by someone else. They only left one line. The four of them then passed by a large hotel. They stood outside for a long time observing no sign of movement. Then they entered the hotel. Victor rings the bell at the front desk to see if there are any zombies here, but it's clear that it's very safe. Alicia and Ophelia go upstairs to search the rooms for supplies, only to find zombie noises coming from several of the rooms. Victor and Madison have a drink on the ground floor and start sharing their experiences of the post-apocalyptic world. The more they talked, the more they got involved, and they drank a lot of wine without realizing it. Victor was playing the piano and Madison was going crazy. Unbeknownst to them, the sound attracted many zombies. Even the zombies on the upper floors of the hotel were attracted. Victor's drink has sobered up a bit. There are zombies on all sides. Although these zombies move slowly, they are surrounded by zombies, but it is difficult to escape. In a world overrun by zombies, they were drinking and playing the piano, causing Madison and Victor to find themselves in this predicament. They can only fight to kill the zombies that come in. Madison accidentally found a small warehouse inside, but the door couldn't be opened. After Madison kills one of the zombies, she has a plan. Madison calls Victor in. Faced with a desperate situation, they have to try Nick's solution. Sure enough, the zombies stop going crazy and treat them as one of them. When they got out, they blocked the door to the lobby. Then they get to the front of the hotel and realize the car is gone. There was no time to think. Madison and Victor scaled the hotel's second floor. Madison was deeply concerned about Alicia's safety and had a strong belief she wouldn't leave. Victor tried to console Madison, suggesting Alicia and Ophelia might have been forced to retreat and left in a vehicle. However, reality differed. Alicia and Ophelia were actually scavenging supplies within the hotel. As Alicia emerged from her shower, she noticed Ophelia was missing. Soon after, Alicia witnessed a horrifying sight. Zombies were plummeting from upstairs incessantly. Their destination was the ground floor where her mother was. Alicia rushed to find Ophelia and descended, only to discover the hallway infested with zombies. At night, Alicia is trapped in her room, marking the number of zombies passing by on the door. Alicia then tidies up and prepares to go downstairs. She moved through the corridor without alerting any zombies, still calling for Ophelia. Unbeknownst to her, Ophelia had already driven away. Zombies were also at the other end of the corridor. Alicia forcibly pried open the elevator doors. Seeing zombies approaching, Alicia disregarded everything else and clung to the rope. Fortunately, the zombies couldn't reach her, but Alicia was losing strength. At that moment, a stranger, a woman, grabbed Alicia. As soon as she came out, the woman held Alicia down and asked if she was sent by the others. In the room, Alicia discovered the woman's name was Elena, the former manager of the hotel. Elena possessed keys to all the hotel rooms. Turns out there were a dozen other tenants in the hotel. One group had taken Elena's nephew hostage, demanding her keys. Alicia explained they had just arrived and she needed to go downstairs to rescue her mother. Elena decided to help Alicia. The next day, the two devised a plan. Alicia attracted the zombies in the hallway and then drew them into a room. It was evident Alicia was no longer the fragile girl she once was. Once the zombies are inside, Alicia closes the glass door, and Elena closes the door from the outside. Cracks are starting to appear in the glass. Fortunately, Elena tossed a curtain over, allowing Alicia to crawl over safely. If Alicia knew what Elena had done before, she wouldn't have trusted her so readily. In the early stages of the virus outbreak, a wedding was taking place in the hotel. The bride's father turned into a zombie. Without hesitation, Elena and her nephew locked the venue's doors, trapping everyone inside. Alicia and Elena reached the first floor, observing the zombies behind the door, convinced that her mother was still inside. Alicia tried to open the door to find her. Alicia ignores Elena's warnings. Just then, a few people appeared behind Alicia and Elena. They were fellow tenants of the hotel. They wanted Elena's key to the hotel. Elena had no choice but to give them the key in exchange for her nephew Hector. In an instant, Alicia pulled Elena behind the door. Zombies surged out like a tide, forcing them to retreat. Elena led Alicia to an underground passage that led back to the hotel. The zombies followed closely behind. However, upon reaching the entrance of the passage, they couldn't open the door that used to be easily accessible. Someone was surely inside. Alicia desperately pounded on the door, while Elena and Hector fended off the zombies. As the zombies closed in, the door finally swung open. Once everyone was out, Victor used a cabinet to block the exit. After a brief adjustment, supplies were scarce. Hotel resources were under the control of Oscar, the one who took the keys. Madison and Victor decided to speak with Oscar. Inside, Madison made her intentions clear and told the men that they were from the outside. It's a much worse world out there. They can only survive together if they unite to build the hotel as a home. The first order of business was to clear the entire hotel of zombies. The woman expressed that she would never forgive Elena. In truth, her husband was the first to mutate, and her husband bit their daughter, yet she placed the blame squarely on Elena. Madison continued, saying that if they didn't unite, there would surely be another group that would find their way here, perhaps a gang of marauding raiders. Oscar too realized the gravity of the situation. Madison obtained the keys. They were willing to follow Madison's lead. The days ahead consisted of systematically killing zombies, room by room, then gathering them together for incineration. Other survivors in the hotel also stepped up willingly to join. However, the workload was immense. They hadn't even cleared 1/10 of the zombies, and finishing the task would take weeks. Just then, Alicia stumbled upon a solution. A sign indicated swift-flowing water. They could lure the zombies to the swift-flowing water via a high bridge and then guide them into the sea to be washed away. They wasted no time. Madison took on the task of attracting the zombies. She instructed Alicia to wait with a boat out at sea. She didn't trust anyone else. Alicia and Hector started making various noises to attract the zombies on the first floor. Victor and Elena opened the doors of each room to lure out the zombies inside. Madison also attracted zombies from a different direction. When all three parties meet at the bridge, the others quickly moved to the bridge. Madison struck a plate to make noise and attract zombies. Once all the zombies were on the bridge, they closed the gate behind them. Alicia's group moved through a side door to the lower level and then swiftly sailed out to sea to pick up Madison. However, due to the rough waves, the boat could only barely stay afloat in the sea. Madison calmly struck the plate in her hand. Her goal was to draw the zombies into the sea. Alicia is already down there waiting for Madison. When the time was right, Madison leaped. The zombies behind her followed suit, jumping into the sea. They did all this just to build a post-apocalyptic survival base based on this hotel. Under Madison's leadership, they began fortifying the hotel's entrance and planting fruits and vegetables for self-sufficiency. The 2-hour power supply each week was indispensable. The ocean became another asset for their survival, providing them with fresh fish every day. Just when everyone thought things were heading in a positive direction, the doorbell rang and Victor just opened the door.
You took my daughter from me. You took her.
It turned out the woman's daughter had turned into a zombie and was hiding in the room. Victor took care of the zombie with Oscar's permission. Kneeling on the ground, Victor called out to Madison in despair. Thankfully, Oscar brought in a medical intern named Andres to help. After examining Victor and ensuring no vital organs were harmed, they now needed antibiotics and alcohol. Elena had an idea of a place where they could trade for supplies. The woman who had wounded Victor, Eileen, had become the most dangerous figure in the hotel. No one knew when Eileen might strike again. As the leader, Madison proposed the suggestion to exile or indefinitely detain Eileen. Everyone agreed to this proposition. Then Elena, Madison, and Oscar headed to the warehouse to exchange drugs. Meanwhile, in Nick's community, they faced significant challenges. Just after Nick and Luciano woke up, they heard that a family of 3 had escaped the community. They were well aware that the community was now facing a water shortage. While they could trade medicine and supplies, it would only last for about half a year. Little did they know, the family of 3 who escaped the community had been captured by Marco, the leader of the supermarket. Marco doesn't want to wait for Nick to exchange drugs again and again and asks the men where the community is. Nick and Alejandro say that they have to plan ahead, but Alejandro keeps his faith and waits for the Lord's salvation. Inside the supermarket, the fish brought by Madison and Elena pleased them, and the man warned them not to wander. However, shouting soon echoed through the supermarket. It was Marco asking about the location of the community from the man, but the man claimed Nick would come with medicine to exchange for supplies. With Elena translating, Madison realized it could possibly be her son Nick, and she couldn't control her emotions any longer. Heading inside, on someone else's turf. This was a grave disrespect. Madison anxiously asks if their name is Nick. Marco was furious, and before Madison could even finish her question, Marco's men took her away. On that day, Nick was taking a stroll when he suddenly felt something was off. Two figures were observing him from a distance. Marco still managed to discover the address of their community. Back at the hotel, Madison and the others handed over the medical supplies to Andres. Alicia was in conversation with Elena. Suddenly, the hospital's power was restored, and the indicator lights came on. Alicia quickly ran to the rooftop and urged her mother to turn off the lights, as it would make them visible to everyone. In this post-apocalyptic world, it was equivalent to revealing their position. However, Madison adamantly refused to turn them off. She believed her son Nick was not far away and this would help him find them. A man in the distance also spotted the hotel's lights. But who was he? Early in the morning, the entrance to the hotel was filled with countless survivors, because last night, in her desperate search for her son Nick, Madison had disregarded warnings and turned on the community's power. The consequence was that all the nearby survivors flocked to the hotel, seeking refuge. Madison finally realized how foolish her actions were, and her apologies seemed feeble. In the quest for survival, everyone was selfish. Just then, a figure appeared at the door, muttering incessantly. After a month had passed, Madison and Travis were finally reunited. Madison asked the others to open the door. Oscar and the rest struggled but eventually opened the door slightly, carefully and cautiously. They allowed Travis to enter alone. Madison and Travis hadn't seen each other for a long time and missed each other deeply. After a conversation, they learned that Chris had met 3 young people and felt like he had found kindred spirits. Not only did he kill the rancher, but he also cooperated with the other 2 young people to kill their injured teammate, just because their injured mate would have slowed them down in their quest. Chris eventually abandoned his father and joined the 2 young people, and Travis saw the hotel sign and came here. Due to the overwhelming number of newcomers, Oscar had no choice but to shelter them in the basement. A total of 43 people had entered, but the hotel couldn't afford to feed half of them, and they were a mixed bag, some with unknown injuries. A plan had to be devised, but did you think it ended there? At night, another group arrived, standing at the front gate and calling out. The next day, inside the basement, the 2 young men showed no gratitude and kept complaining. After some inquiries, Madison learned that one of them had dislocated their arm due to a car accident, and they were also complaining about the driver's incompetence. Sensitive Madison immediately realized they must be the ones who traveled with Chris. They said Chris was dead. Madison was unsure what to do and sought out Victor. Victor, however, advises that Travis should never know about this, or he'll have no hope of surviving in the post-apocalyptic world. They then decided to send the 2 young men away. Madison told them she would take them to a separate room for arm treatment, but then everyone in the basement started protesting about how they could stay in the room, and so the group began to protest behind Madison. Travis, who was in the room, heard the ruckus outside and saw the 2 young men who were being kicked out. Travis then rushed to stop Madison, and they took the 2 young men to a room. Travis struggled to control his emotions and had the doctor treat Brandon's arm. Brandon says they'll tell what happened to Travis' son, but they have to give them a car and supplies. Despite objections from those behind her, Madison reluctantly agreed. Brandon said they hadn't been away from the farm for long. They were exhausted from driving, and Chris volunteered to take the wheel. But unexpectedly, they ended up getting into a car accident. The car rolled over for a few weeks and Chris was thrown through the windscreen and died instantly. Travis found it hard to accept and was about to leave, but he then asked where they had left Chris. One of Brandon's companions quickly said they had dragged Chris out of the car and buried him under a tree. Travis immediately sensed something was amiss. Recalling how these 2 had treated their injured comrade before, Travis closed the door and locked it. He was ready to use force to extract the truth. Despite his seemingly mild demeanor, Travis was exceptionally strong, and taking on 2 people was no challenge. Faced with the threat of overwhelming force, Brandon eventually spilled the truth. After the car accident, Chris was still alive but had suffered a severe leg fracture. These 2 then shot and killed him. As a father, realizing his son had been gunned down by these 2 sent Travis into a frenzy. Travis went crazy and beat them up.
You got to stop! Please!
But Travis had already gone into a frenzy, paying no heed to anyone. Oscar got hit by Travis, too. Travis unleashed his rage, mercilessly beating the 2 until they were dead. At this moment, it seemed like Travis had lost the entire world. Finally, others managed to break a window and open the door. Oscar was also seriously injured and in dire condition. Madison's immediate concern was to comfort her husband. Shortly after, Elena brought members of the community to take Travis away. They couldn't allow a murderer to stay. Madison's actions had caused the community to lose trust in her. Fear the Walking Dead, Season 2, was nearing its conclusion. Among millions of viewers, the most common criticism was that Travis and his family always seemed to bring trouble wherever they went. Upon learning of his son Chris's death, Travis killed the two perpetrators in a fit of rage. Any father would likely have done the same, or even more violently. However, the unluckiest of them all is Oscar, but this family was quite extraordinary. After the incident, Travis appeared helpless, while Madison played the role of a caring wife. Deeply concerned for her husband, they had no guilt whatsoever regarding the uncertain fate of Oscar's life and death. At this moment, Andres was examining Oscar. Oscar's brain was hemorrhaging, and immediate surgery was necessary. The only tool available was a paper cutter. Life and death were now left to fate. The surgery went into the night, and by then, it was clear that Oscar's condition was beyond saving. Andres, Hector, and Elena remained by his side, infuriated by the fact that the culprits were sleeping soundly in their room. Lying on the couch, Travis was still thinking about his son. Suddenly, Hector kicked open Madison's door and delivered a brutal blow to Travis. Madison tried to intervene, assuring them that they would leave together with Travis. Hector is drowning in grief over the loss of his best friend and he's frantically venting his anger. Andres aimed his gun at Travis, accusing him of killing but sleeping soundly here. As Andres prepared to fire, Alicia plunged a knife into his chest. Andres collapsed, escalating the conflict further. Hector shoved Alicia against the wall, and Travis stepped in to protect her. Victor arrived with a gun, managing to defuse the situation. Hector and his group rushed out to call for backup, leaving Madison to realize they needed to escape. Andres was left unattended on the ground. The family arrives at the car. Victor, on the other hand, says he doesn't want to go any further and is prepared to stay. And he probably knows he'll die sooner or later with a family like this. Travis wasted no time and smashed through the hotel's gate with the car. Their next destination, the supermarket. In search of clues about Nick, this community uses a zombie horde as a protective shield and must be accessed through trucks in the zombie horde. But the boss of the supermarket, Marco, finds out. Nick and Alejandro knew they needed to act quickly. Marco would likely attack the community. Alejandro, however, was a devout believer who had faith that God would save them. The next morning, Nick and his companion didn't alert Alejandro as they quietly took medicines from a cabinet. They headed to the supermarket to negotiate with Marco. Inside the supermarket, they were surprised to find unfamiliar faces. Marco was in discussion with another faction's leader, planning an attack on the community. Nick offered medicines for a peaceful exchange, hoping Marco would spare them, but Marco didn't take it. He said that this group has all the medicines in the area, and they are also interested in the location of your base. He warned that they should evacuate the area quickly or face a united attack on their community. Upon Nick's return, he discussed the situation with Alejandro and Luciana, hoping to notify everyone to escape. However, Alejandro insisted on staying put. As they debated, a patient on the bed turned into a zombie and lunged at Nick. In an attempt to save Nick, Alejandro was bitten on the arm. Eventually, Nick and the zombie fell from the second floor, resolving the threat. Unfortunately, Alejandro was bitten in the process. These people have been living here since the end of the world, and are basically incapable of escaping and surviving. They were determined to stay. Nick had to take his backpack and go on his way alone. When Nick got to the street, he was surprised to see a rescue helicopter at the border and it landed in a refugee camp. Nick eventually returned to the community. Alejandro was now running a high fever. Surprised that Nick managed to come back, Nick informed Alejandro of a sanctuary at the border, urging everyone to escape and avoid needless sacrifice. The following day, several vehicles arrived at the community's entrance. Marco, accompanied by his subordinates and armed with heavy weapons, arrived at the community. It was evident that they had figured out the method of entering and exiting the community. They covered each other and managed to enter the truck amidst the zombie horde. They just walked into the neighborhood and found it unusually quiet. When they got to the neighborhood, there was no one there. Thinking that the people must have fled in fear, they celebrated by firing their weapons. At this point, Alejandro climbed into the truck, started the engine and drove off. The zombies began moving toward the community's interior. As Marco and his group heard the commotion, they approached the scene where countless zombies were advancing towards them. They hold them off for a while and then start to retreat. There are too many zombies. Madison and the others followed the clues and came to the neighborhood, only to see zombies all over the place. They told Alicia to hide. Madison and Travis came to the neighborhood. The place had turned into a zombie haven. Even Marco himself had succumbed to the infection and become a zombie. Amidst the chaos, Alicia discovered Alejandro inside a truck. Madison was anxiously searching for her son, Nick. Alejandro finally informed them that Nick had gone to the border, which brought Madison some relief. Nick and Luciana, leading the community members, headed towards the border in hopes of finding safety. However, their optimism was short-lived as they were suddenly attacked by a group of armed assailants. Fear the Walking Dead, Season 2, officially concluded with this series of events. The ultimate fate of Nick and the others remains uncertain. Are these soldiers really pre-apocalyptic soldiers? Will Nick have another chance to reunite with his family?